The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of Chicago into a maze of glistening asphalt and blurred neon lights. Ethan Caldwell, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth and power, stood drenched under the awning of a shuttered diner. His tailored suit clung to his frame, ruined by the downpour. His phone was dead, his wallet stolen, and his driver God knows where. For the first time in years, Ethan was utterly alone, stripped of the armor his fortune usually provided. He wasn't supposed to be here, in this forgotten corner of the city where the skyscrapers gave way to crumbling brick buildings and flickering street lights. A business deal gone wrong had forced him to take a detour, and then a mugger had taken everything else. Now he was just a man in the rain, desperate for help. Ethan pushed open the door of the only place still lit on the block, a dingy bar called Murphy's. The bell above the door jingled weakly, announcing his arrival to a room full of weathered faces. The air smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Conversations paused as eyes turned toward him, taking in his soaked suit and the faint air of someone who didn't belong. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the chill seeping into his bones. "I need to use a phone. Mine's dead, and I've been robbed." The bartender, a burly man with a graying beard, raised an eyebrow. "Robbed, huh? You don't look like the type to get mugged." Ethan forced a tight smile. "Looks can be deceiving. Can I borrow a phone or not?" The bartender snorted, wiping a glass with a rag that looked dirtier than the counter. "Payphone's in the back, if you got a quarter." "I don't have any cash," Ethan admitted, his jaw tightening. "Like I said, I was robbed." A ripple of laughter spread through the bar. A woman in a faded leather jacket leaned back in her chair, smirking. "Robbed you? Bet you got a gold-plated phone stashed somewhere, rich boy." "I don't," Ethan said, his voice sharp now. "I just need help. I'll pay you back double, triple, whatever you want." The laughter grew louder. A man in a flannel shirt, his face rough with stubble, leaned forward. "Hear that, folks? He's gonna pay us back. What's your name? Wall Street, Rockefeller?" "Ethan Caldwell," he said, the name dropping like a stone into the room. He expected recognition. His face had been on the cover of Forbes twice, but the crowd just stared, unimpressed. "Caldwell, how?" the bartender said, leaning on the counter. "Sounds like a guy who don't need our help. Why don't you call your private jet to come pick you up?" Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "I'm not asking for a jet. I'm asking for a phone or a rye, anything." The woman in the leather jacket stood, her boots scuffing the floor. "Listen, buddy, this ain't your penthouse. We don't do charity for guys who look like they wipe their asses with $100 bills. Get lost." Humiliation burned in Ethan's chest, hotter than the cold rain ever could. He opened his mouth to argue, but the door jingled again, cutting him off. A young woman stepped inside, shaking water from her cheap umbrella. She was in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and a threadbare coat that did little to keep her dry. Her sneakers squeaked on the floor as she glanced around, her eyes landing on Ethan. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Rich guy here says he got robbed," the bartender said, smirking. "Wants to borrow a phone. Ain't that a riot?" The young woman frowned, studying Ethan. Her gaze wasn't mocking like the others. It was curious, maybe even concerned. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. caught off guard by the question. "I've been better," he said, his tone clipped. She nodded, as if that was all she needed to hear. "I've got a phone. You can use it." The bar went quiet. The bartender's smirk faded, and the woman in the leather jacket scoffed. "You serious? Lena, you're gonna help this guy?" Lena ignored them, pulling a cracked iPhone from her pocket. She handed it to Ethan. "Here, it's old, but it works." Ethan stared at the phone, then at her. "Why are you doing this?" She shrugged, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Because you look like you need it." He took the phone, his fingers brushing hers. It was the first act of kindness he'd encountered all night, and it felt heavier than he expected. He dialed his assistant's number, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried his driver's same result. Frustration gnawed at him as he handed the phone back. "No luck?" Lena asked. "No," Ethan said, running a hand through his wet hair. "Thanks anyway." She tilted her head, studying him again. "You got somewhere to go." "Not tonight," he admitted, the words tasting bitter. "My place is across the city, and without my wallet or phone." Lena hesitated, then glanced at the bartender. "Murphy, you got a spare blanket or something? He can wait out the storm here." The bartender laughed, a harsh bark. "What, you want to turn my bar into a homeless shelter now? Get him out of here." "Lena, you're too soft." "I'll take him," Lena said, her voice firm. "He can crash at my place until morning." The room erupted in protest. "You're nuts." The woman in the leather jacket snapped. "You don't even know this guy. What if he's some creep?" "He's not," Lena said, though she couldn't possibly know that. She turned to Ethan. "You're not, right?" Ethan met her gaze, something softening in his chest. "I'm not." "Then it's settled," she said, grabbing her umbrella. "Come on." Against his better judgment, Ethan followed her into the rain. The bar's jeers faded behind them as they walked through the storm, Lena's umbrella barely shielding them. She led him to a battered sedan parked a block away, its paint chipped and one headlight dim. "It's not much," she said, unlocking the doors, "but it runs." Ethan slid into the passenger seat, the smell of old coffee and damp fabric filling his nose. "Why are you helping me?" he asked again, unable to let it go. Lena started the car, the engine sputtering before catching. "I've been where you are," she said simply. "Not the rich part, obviously, but the part where you're stuck and no one cares. Figured you could use a break." They drove in silence, the city blurring past. Lena's apartment was in a rundown building on the south side, the kind of place Ethan wouldn't have glanced at twice. The stairwell smelled of mildew, and the walls were stained with years of neglect. Her apartment was small but tidy, with mismatched furniture and a single light bulb flickering in the kitchen. "You can take the couch," she said, tossing him a worn blanket. "It's not the Ritz, but it's dry." Ethan sat, the blanket rough against his skin. "You don't have to do this, I know," Lena said, filling a kettle with water. "Want tea? It's cheap, but it's hot." He nodded, watching her move with quiet efficiency. She was nothing like the people he usually surrounded himself with. No polish, no agenda, just real. It unnerved him. Over tea, Lena asked about his life. Ethan gave her the short version. CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, a real estate empire that spanned the Midwest. He expected her to be impressed, but she just nodded, like he'd told her he worked at a gas station. "What about you?" he asked, deflecting. Lena shrugged. I work at a community center, teach kids art, help with after-school programs. Doesn't pay much, but it's something. Why do it? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. You could do better. She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. Better how? More money. I like what I do. It matters. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. His world was built on profit, not purpose. The conversation drifted, and soon Lena was yawning. I'm gonna crash, she said. You need anything, just knock. She disappeared into her bedroom, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He lay on the couch, staring at the cracked ceiling. Sleep didn't come easy, not with the weight of the night pressing down on him. He'd been humiliated, stripped of his identity, and saved by a stranger who had no reason to care. It was a lot to process. Morning came too soon, the gray light filtering through thin curtains. Lena was already up, frying eggs in the tiny kitchen. You sleep okay? She asked. Fine, Ethan lied, sitting up. Listen, I need to get back to my life. Can you drive me downtown? Sure, she said, sliding a plate of eggs in front of him. Eat first, you look like you're about to keel over. He ate, the food simple but warm. They drove in silence, the city waking up around them. When they reached his office building, a sleek tower of glass and steel, Ethan felt a strange pang. This was his world, but it felt foreign after last night. Thanks, he said, pausing at the curb. I mean it. I'll make this worth your while. Lena waved him off. Don't worry about it. Just don't get mugged again, okay? He smiled, a real one this time. Deal. Inside, Ethan's world snapped back into focus. His assistant, Claire, was frantic, bombarding him with questions about where he'd been. He brushed her off, diving into damage control. The mugging had cost him more than his wallet. A competitor had leaked news of his absence, and stocks were dipping. Ethan spent the day in meetings, barking orders, rebuilding his armor. But Lena lingered in his mind, a quiet counterpoint to the chaos. Days turned into weeks. Ethan threw himself into work, but something had shifted. The deals, the power plays, they felt hollow. He kept thinking about Lena's apartment, her cracked phone, her kindness. He tracked her down through the community center, intending to repay her a check, maybe, or a donation. Something to balance the scales. When he showed up at the center, a crumbling building and a rough neighborhood, Lena was in the middle of an art class, surrounded by kids painting on butcher paper. She looked up, surprised but not flustered. Ethan, what are you doing here? I wanted to thank you, he said, suddenly feeling out of place in his pristine suit. Properly, she wiped paint off her hands, smiling. You already did. I'm good. I'm not, he said, the words slipping out before you could stop them. I owe you. Name your price. Lena's smile faded, replaced by something sharper. I didn't help you for money. If that's why you're here, you can go. Ethan flinched, her words cutting deeper than the bar's mockery. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I want to do something for you, for this place. She studied him, her eyes searching. Okay, she said finally. Come back tomorrow. Help out. See what we do here. He agreed, more out of guilt than conviction. But when he returned, something unexpected happened. The kids, loud and chaotic, drew him in. Lena's patience, her quiet passion, it was infectious. He started showing up regularly, first to help, then because he wanted to. The center became a refuge, a place where he wasn't Ethan Caldwell, CEO, but just Ethan, the guy who was terrible at painting but great at telling stories. Months passed. The center was struggling, rent was overdue, supplies were running low. Ethan could have written a check and been done with it, but Lena wouldn't let him. If you want to help, she said, do it right. Fundraise. Get the community involved. So he did. He leveraged his connections, organized a gala, and raised enough to keep the center afloat for years. The night of the event, Lena stood on stage, thanking everyone. Her eyes found Ethan in the crowd, and she smiled a smile that hit him harder than any deal he'd ever closed. But the story doesn't end there. The twist came a week later, when Ethan was cleaning out his office. Tucked in a drawer was a letter, yellowed with age. It was from his father, a man he barely remembered, who died when Ethan was a kid. The letter spoke of a dead woman who'd helped him when he was at his lowest, a stranger who'd given him a chance to rebuild. Her name was Maria Alvarez. Lena's mother. Ethan's breath caught. He'd never known. Lena had never said a word. He went to her that night, the letter trembling in his hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Lena looked at the letter, her eyes softening. "Because it didn't matter. I helped you because it was right, not because of some old debt." Ethan stared at her, the weight of it all crashing down. He'd spent his life chasing wealth, power, control, but here, in this tiny apartment, with this woman who'd change everything, he realized what he'd been missing. Not money, not status, connection, purpose. They stood there, the letter between them, and Ethan knew he'd never be the same. The man who'd walked into Murphy's bar was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned what it meant to be truly rich. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder about kindness. Subscribe for more stories that'll tug at your heartstrings and maybe even change the way you see the world. What's a moment of kindness you've experienced? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear it.